He thought he was the mastermind behind his $65 billion empire, promoting his mistress to VP. Little did he know, his wife had been the secret CEO all along. Nathaniel Hawke was the kind of man who exuded confidence the moment he stepped into a room. Investors, colleagues, and even his employees admired him for his decisiveness, charm, and apparent genius in growing the $65 billion empire he claimed as his own. Every board meeting, every news article, every congratulatory email seemed to reinforce his belief that he was the mastermind behind it all. To the outside world, Nathaniel was untouchable, a symbol of ambition rewarded. But at home, Nathaniel's wife, Celine Hawke, watched silently. Celine, elegant and composed, had a sharp mind that rivaled the greatest strategists. She had built the company from the ground up, managing every critical decision, every acquisition, and every major deal. Yet she remained invisible, her identity hidden behind layers of corporate structures and anonymity. Nathaniel never suspected that the advisory emails he casually read were actually drafted and sent by her, or that the recommendations he praised so lavishly were her ideas executed flawlessly. Celine's silence was deliberate. She had chosen to let Nathaniel believe he was in control, allowing him to bask in the glory of his illusion. It was a test, and she had infinite patience. She knew the man she married was ambitious, but arrogant, entitled, and easily seduced by flattery. Watching him rise under false pretenses stung, yet she saw a lesson in it. Sometimes the people closest to power must confront their own blindness before learning humility. At night, she would sit in the quiet of their luxurious penthouse, reflecting on the irony. The man who thought he had conquered the world had never even realized who was steering the ship. Celine's plan wasn't just about protecting the empire. It was about teaching Nathaniel a lesson in trust, arrogance, and the devastating consequences of underestimating those who silently wield true power. The stage was set. The perfect illusion was alive, and Nathaniel had no idea that the real CEO, the one who held the company's fate in her hands, was watching his every move. Nathaniel had always prided himself on spotting talent, believing that recognizing potential was his gift. So when Lyra Carmichael walked into his office for a routine interview, he was immediately captivated, not just by her polished confidence, but by the subtle charm she exuded. Nathaniel convinced himself she was exactly what the company needed. Ambitious, clever, and completely loyal, or so he thought. Without consulting Celine, he promoted Lyra to vice president, a role that gave her control over major departments and key decision-making. Nathaniel celebrated the promotion privately, imagining how brilliant it would look to the board that he had personally discovered and elevated this rising star. He didn't notice the small smirk of satisfaction that passed over Celine's face as she watched from the background. She had anticipated this move. Every flattery, every sly compliment, every subtle manipulation of Nathaniel's ego had led him here. Lyra, meanwhile, relished her newfound power. She began subtly undermining colleagues she considered competition, positioning herself as the indispensable VP Nathaniel imagined she was. Her ambition was a wildfire, and Nathaniel, blinded by desire and trust, failed to see the danger in her calculating eyes. Celine observed silently, noting every interaction, every whispered suggestion, every moment Nathaniel leaned on Lyra's advice. She didn't intervene, not yet. She knew that letting the facade unfold naturally would reveal the true character of both Nathaniel and Lyra. It was the perfect storm. Nathaniel's arrogance, Lyra's ambition, and Celine's quiet but precise orchestration. By promoting Lyra, Nathaniel had unknowingly set himself on a path toward betrayal and humiliation. Celine's strategy was already in motion, and the seeds of karma had been planted. The house of illusions Nathaniel had built on his supposed genius was beginning to crack, and the cracks would soon widen into a chasm he could never repair. At first, the signs were subtle. Nathaniel noticed contracts and emails signed by S. Hawke, addressed to him with instructions he didn't recall approving. There were board meeting notes he hadn't written, decisions seemingly implemented without his input, and mysterious memos detailing strategies he thought were his ideas. Each anomaly should have triggered suspicion, yet Nathaniel dismissed them, too confident in his own brilliance to consider anyone else might be orchestrating behind the scenes. Celine watched each of these moments with a mixture of sadness and quiet amusement. Every oversight, every dismissed hint of truth was a lesson in humility. She allowed Nathaniel to learn the hard way. He believed he was in control, but the very foundations of his empire were guided by her hand. While Nathaniel congratulated himself for his supposed foresight, Celine ensured the company's growth remained steady, making adjustments behind closed doors, protecting him from mistakes he didn't even realize he was making. Meanwhile, Lyra began exploiting these gaps, subtly steering Nathaniel toward decisions that served her own ambitions. Nathaniel remained oblivious, interpreting Lyra's assertiveness as loyalty and brilliance. He praised her publicly, deepening her sense of power, while unknowingly walking into Celine's carefully laid trap. Even loyal executives started whispering about Nathaniel's unusual detachment, but he ignored them, his arrogance blinding him to the reality Celine observed daily. Each dismissed warning, each overlooked sign, only strengthened her conviction that the revelation would be all the more powerful when the truth finally emerged. The irony was cruel but deliberate. Nathaniel, who believed he commanded the $65 billion empire, was merely a pawn in a game designed to teach him the cost of ignorance. Every misstep, every blind trust he placed in Lyra, was recorded in Celine's mind. The stage was set for a collision of ambition, betrayal, and karma that would leave him unrecognizable, not just to the world, but to himself. With her promotion secured, Lyra Carmichael began playing her cards like a master strategist. Every meeting became an opportunity to assert dominance, every suggestion a subtle assertion of control. She flattered Nathaniel, reinforcing his ego, while quietly undermining colleagues who threatened her rise. She prided herself on being indispensable, unaware that she was stepping straight into Celine's carefully orchestrated trap. Nathaniel, blinded by ambition and desire, fell for it completely. He saw Lyra as the star of the company he had nurtured and believed he had discovered. He relied on her advice, praising her judgment to the board and publicly attributing key initiatives to her genius. To him, he was not only recognizing talent, but also cementing his reputation as a visionary leader. Celine observed with a quiet intensity, noting every manipulation, every whispered word from Lyra that attempted to sway Nathaniel. She did not intervene, not yet. She wanted to see the full extent of Lyra's arrogance and Nathaniel's blindness. Every action Lyra took, every inch she climbed, was carefully logged in Celine's mind, a record of the betrayal Nathaniel was blind to and Lyra had unknowingly committed. Lyra's confidence grew dangerously high. She began marginalizing other executives, claiming their ideas as her own, and subtly sabotaging those she considered rivals. Her ambition was a wildfire consuming anything in its path, but Nathaniel never saw the flames. Celine, controlling the fire from behind the scenes, allowed it to burn, knowing the inevitable collapse would be spectacular. In this game of power, Celine held all the aces. Nathaniel, intoxicated by success and flattered by Lyra's attentions, had unknowingly handed the boardroom to a woman who would soon crash spectacularly, setting the stage for the ultimate revelation, revenge, and karmic justice that would leave him shattered and Lyra ruined. The company's annual gala was a glittering affair, filled with influential investors, executives, and media personalities. Nathaniel arrived in his tailored suit, beaming with pride, completely unaware of the undercurrents swirling around him. Lyra glided beside him, radiant and confident, basking in the attention he lavished on her. To Nathaniel, it was a night of triumph, a celebration of his brilliance and the promotion he had so cleverly orchestrated. Celine, ever composed in a sleek, midnight blue gown, observed from across the room. Her presence was understated yet commanding, a silent reminder that she was always a step ahead. During a quiet moment, she approached Nathaniel with a glass of champagne in hand. Her voice, calm but pointed, cut through his oblivious excitement. "You've given the crown to someone else while I've been keeping it warm." Nathaniel laughed nervously, assuming she was joking. The words barely registered. His mind fixated on Lyra, the applause, the recognition. He didn't understand that Celine's remark was more than a passing quip. It was a calculated warning, a signal that the power he flaunted was never truly his to claim. Lyra, sensing something she couldn't quite name, felt a flicker of unease. But Nathaniel, blinded by pride, brushed it off. He was enthralled by the narrative he had constructed. That he had discovered and nurtured talent, elevated a rising star, and solidified his empire. Celine let him enjoy the illusion for a little longer, knowing that when the truth emerged, the impact would be devastating. The gala ended with cheers and accolades, yet beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. Celine's subtle words were the first ripple in what would become a tidal wave of betrayal and revelation. Nathaniel's confidence remained unshaken, for now, but the seeds of karma had been sown, and Celine's patient orchestration was beginning to tighten its grip on the empire he so blindly believed was his own. It was supposed to be the deal of the year, a multi-billion-dollar acquisition that would cement the company's dominance in the market. Nathaniel, proud of himself for entrusting it to Lyra, felt confident that her charm and calculated assertiveness would ensure success. He watched as she led meetings, made presentations, and orchestrated negotiations, believing she was the linchpin of the empire he had supposedly built. But Lyra's ambition had blinded her. She overlooked critical financial details, underestimated the competitors, and ignored subtle warnings from other executives. By the time Nathaniel realized something was wrong, the deal had already unraveled. Investors and board members demanded answers, pointing fingers at the VP they had come to trust. Nathaniel, as the visible leader, took the brunt of the backlash. His carefully curated image of genius and authority began to crack under scrutiny. Behind the scenes, Celine worked silently, mitigating the fallout. She adjusted contracts, handled investor concerns, and stabilized internal operations, ensuring the company didn't collapse entirely. Every move was invisible to Nathaniel, who remained oblivious to the fact that it was his wife, not Lyra, that had saved the empire from catastrophe. Lyra, stunned by Celine's intervention, tried to maintain her composure, but the cracks in her confidence were obvious. Nathaniel, meanwhile, struggled with disbelief, unable to comprehend how the deal could fail under the VP he had personally promoted. He began questioning his judgment, but never Celine's. The irony was cruel. Karma was starting to make its presence known, and Nathaniel's world, the one he thought he commanded, was beginning to crumble in ways he could never have predicted. After the failed deal, Nathaniel's confidence began to waver. He noticed the small, unsettling anomalies he had previously ignored. Emails signed as Hawk, strategic decisions implemented without his approval, and reports that detailed insights he had never provided. A gnawing suspicion began to creep into his mind, though he refused to confront it fully. He told himself it was a fluke, a clerical error, or perhaps overthinking caused by the recent stress. Meanwhile, Celine observed him with the quiet patience of someone who had long predicted this moment. Every misstep, every glance of doubt in Nathaniel's eyes, strengthened her resolve. She had built the empire from scratch and allowed him to walk in the illusion of power, letting him believe he had achieved what only she had orchestrated. Now, as the cracks began to show, she allowed a subtle tension to build, knowing the eventual revelation would be far more potent than any direct confrontation. Lyra, sensing Nathaniel's growing unease, tried to solidify her influence further. She became increasingly bold, manipulating reports, taking more risks, and attempting to assert control in ways that highlighted her arrogance. Yet she remained completely unaware of Celine's hand behind every safeguard. Nathaniel's private moments became restless. He began examining contracts, cross-checking reports, and noticing patterns that didn't make sense. His curiosity grew into unease, and unease into suspicion. Still, he lacked the evidence to confront Celine, whose calm demeanor continued to mask the truth. The empire Nathaniel thought he commanded was slowly revealing its fragility. Every overlooked detail, every ignored sign, was a reflection of his hubris. Celine's careful orchestration remained invisible, and the perfect storm of betrayal, karma, and revelation loomed closer. Nathaniel had begun to sense it, but he had no idea how devastating the truth would be. The boardroom was tense, filled with executives and investors anticipating a routine strategy meeting. Nathaniel walked in with his usual confidence, unaware that today would redefine everything he thought he knew. Lyra strutted beside him, a mixture of pride and superiority radiating from her every movement. Nathaniel felt unstoppable, until Celine entered the room. She carried herself with calm authority, the kind of presence that silenced conversations without a word. For the first time, Nathaniel noticed the sharp intelligence in her eyes, the subtle control in her posture, and the aura that had always been behind the company's triumphs. When she spoke, her voice was steady but unyielding. "Nathaniel, there's something you need to understand. The company you think you've led has been run by me." Gasps rippled across the room. Executives exchanged bewildered glances. Nathaniel froze, heart hammering, as Celine revealed her identity as the secret CEO. Every decision, every strategic maneuver, every triumph he had claimed as his own was, in fact, orchestrated by her. Lyra's smug confidence faltered instantly, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. Nathaniel's mind raced. He remembered the mysterious emails, the unsigned reports, the subtle interventions he had dismissed. The humiliation washed over him in waves. Celine continued, detailing the missteps Lyra had taken, the ways Nathaniel had been manipulated, and the countless times she had rescued the company from near disaster. All while he remained oblivious. The boardroom, once a place of his perceived power, became a courtroom of truth. Nathaniel's ego, inflated for so long, deflated entirely in the face of undeniable evidence. Lyra's arrogance had led her to this moment of downfall, and Nathaniel was left stunned, betrayed not just by Lyra but by his own blindness. Celine's revelation was precise, controlled, and devastating. The empire Nathaniel thought he commanded was hers all along, and the lesson he would learn that day would be seared into memory. True power isn't in visibility, it's in mastery, patience, and unseen authority. The boardroom fallout was immediate and merciless. Lyra Carmichael, once poised and untouchable, found herself exposed for the arrogance and miscalculations that had nearly ruined the company. Celine, calm and unwavering, outlined each misstep in meticulous detail. Decisions ignored, contracts mishandled, and strategies that demonstrated reckless ambition. The room, previously enchanted by Lyra's charm, turned cold with judgment. Nathaniel watched, numb, as the board voted to remove Lyra from her position. Her career, built on ambition and manipulation, collapsed in an instant. The woman he had trusted and elevated now faced public disgrace. She tried to protest, to explain, but the evidence was irrefutable. Every executive, every investor, every employee knew the truth. Lyra's rise had been built on deception, and the empire she attempted to claim was never hers to wield. Nathaniel's own humiliation was just as profound. Internal investigations revealed the consequences of his blind promotions and negligence. Investors questioned his judgment, colleagues whispered about his incompetence, and his reputation, once thought unshakable, was irreparably damaged. For the first time, Nathaniel understood the true cost of arrogance and misplaced trust. Celine, however, remained untouched. She had orchestrated the outcome with precision, ensuring the company's stability, while exposing the true nature of those around her. Her revelation wasn't just vengeance, it was justice, a lesson in karma. As Lyra left in disgrace and Nathaniel grappled with shame, Celine assumed her rightful place as CEO. Her authority was now absolute, commanding respect not through manipulation, but through undeniable mastery and foresight. The empire he had thought he owned was, in truth, hers all along, and the consequences of betrayal and hubris had been delivered with perfect clarity. In that moment, the balance of power shifted irrevocably. Karma had spoken, betrayal had been punished, and Nathaniel and Lyra were left to reckon with the magnitude of their misjudgments. The penthouse, once a sanctuary of luxury and pride, now felt suffocating. Nathaniel sat on the edge of their leather couch, head in his hands, the weight of humiliation pressing down on him. Celine entered, her presence calm yet formidable, and Nathaniel looked up to see not just the woman he had married, but the architect of the empire he had always taken for granted. For the first time, Nathaniel truly saw her, not as the supportive spouse behind the scenes, but as a brilliant, decisive leader whose patience had masked decades of brilliance. His voice trembled as he asked, "Why didn't you tell me?" Celine sat across from him, her gaze steady, unflinching. "Because I needed you to see it for yourself," she replied softly. "I needed you to understand what blind ambition, arrogance, and misplaced trust can cost a person. You promoted someone who didn't deserve it, trusted someone who manipulated you, and ignored the truth that was right in front of your eyes. I let you learn the hard way. Nathaniel felt the sting of betrayal, not by Celine, but by his own hubris. His mistakes, his failure to notice the obvious, had led him to this breaking point. He had lost not only professional credibility, but the illusion of control he had cherished. Celine's voice softened, tinged with both sorrow and resolve. I built this empire, yes. But I also protected it. And I protected you from yourself. You had to face the consequences of your choices, just as Lyra did. Now you understand what true leadership requires. The room was heavy with unspoken emotion. Nathaniel, humbled and broken, realized that Celine's actions had been both a punishment and a lesson. A reckoning for a man who had overestimated his power and underestimated the strength of the woman beside him. In that moment, he saw the depth of her patience, intelligence, and unwavering resolve. He knew that redemption, if possible, would only come with humility and acceptance. Weeks after the revelation, the company was stabilizing under Celine's leadership, stronger and more respected than ever. Nathaniel, still reeling from the fallout, returned to the office with a new perspective, humble, cautious, and painfully aware of his misjudgments. Celine, observing him closely, decided it was time for a controlled, yet instructive, final move. Instead of banishing Nathaniel entirely, she offered him a minor advisory role. The position allowed him to contribute insights, attend select meetings, and provide guidance, but only under her strict supervision. It was a taste of power without authority, a subtle reminder of the lessons he had failed to learn. Nathaniel accepted, aware that this was both a lifeline and a limitation. Celine made it clear that this arrangement was not charity, it was a test in itself. She wanted him to grasp the value of humility, patience, and discernment. Every decision he now made would be observed, every recommendation weighed against her expertise. For Nathaniel, this was a constant reminder of the arrogance that had led to his downfall, and the devastating consequences of overlooking those who had true control. Lyra, now entirely removed from the company, served as a cautionary tale. Nathaniel could not forget the humiliation she endured, nor the role his blind trust played in it. Celine's quiet satisfaction lay not in vengeance alone, but in demonstrating the full scope of karma and consequence. At home, Nathaniel's perspective had shifted as well. He no longer saw Celine merely as a supportive spouse. He recognized her as the formidable force who had built an empire and ensured its survival. Her final move was both a mercy and a lesson. He could participate, but only within the boundaries of respect and acknowledgement of true power. In this carefully orchestrated balance, Celine ensured the empire thrived, karma was served, and Nathaniel finally understood what it meant to be humbled by those he had underestimated. Months had passed since the dramatic boardroom revelation, yet the echoes of betrayal and karma still resonated throughout the company. Celine Hawke sat in her corner office, the skyline glowing behind her, reflecting on the journey she had orchestrated with patience, precision, and unwavering resolve. The empire she had built was stronger than ever, not because of chance or luck, but because of her intelligence, foresight, and the hard lessons she had allowed Nathaniel and Lyra to experience. Nathaniel had adapted to his new advisory role. The humbling experience had stripped away arrogance, leaving him a man capable of reflection and cautious insight. He no longer assumed power, no longer sought glory for himself. Instead, he witnessed true leadership in action, Celine's mastery, her subtle orchestration, and the quiet authority that had always guided the company's success. Lyra's downfall remained a stark reminder of ambition unchecked by integrity. Her arrogance had led to public disgrace, demonstrating that cunning and charm alone could never substitute for competence and ethical stewardship. Nathaniel, chastened and wiser, often reflected on how easily he had been blinded by flattery and desire, a painful lesson etched permanently in memory. Celine's moral was clear. True power does not demand recognition. It commands respect through vision, integrity, and decisive action. Betrayal can be punished without cruelty, and revenge can be precise without chaos. Karma is patient, often waiting for the perfect moment to reveal the truth to those who underestimate it. As she looked out over the city she had helped shape, Celine allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Nathaniel had learned humility. Lyra had faced the consequences of her greed, and the company, her legacy, stood unshaken. In the intricate web of betrayal, revenge, and hidden strength, justice had been served, and the lesson of true leadership had been engraved for all to see. The story closed not with chaos, but with clarity. Power, patience, and principle always prevail.
Some stories don't end, they follow you. If this one stayed in your mind, you know what to do.